Singapore's 60th birthday is coming, and recently, my appreciation for our founding father, Lee Kuan Yew, just grew so much. So today, I'm diving into a pivotal moment in Southeast Asian history, one that still sparks debate. Was Singapore kicked out of Malaysia, or did we choose to leave? This isn't just an old story. It's a living question with deep emotional and political roots. And as I recently discovered on my first trip to Sarawak this July, the answer you get can really depend on who you're talking to. You see, during my conversations with various Sarawakians, a pretty consistent idea came up. That Singapore, specifically under Lee Kuan Yew's leadership, made the choice to leave Malaysia. It was often painted as a deliberate strategic decision by Singapore. But is that the full picture? Let's peel back the layers of this complex narrative. Let's talk about the dream of merger on hopes and foundations. To truly understand Singapore's separation, I need to rewind to 1963. After gaining self-governance from the British in 1959, Singapore was a tiny island nation with no natural resources, facing an uncertain future. There were real worries about its economic survival and internal security, especially the threat of communist influence. The idea of a merger with Malaya, Sabah, or also known as North Borneo at that time, and Sarawak to form Malaysia seemed like a logical solution. Lee Kuan Yew and his People's Action Party, PAP, were strong advocates for this merger. They believed it would bring economic stability through a common market and boost security. The vision was a stronger, united federation. Yet, there are cracks in the union when it comes to economy and ideology.
However, almost as soon as Malaysia was formed on September 16th, 1963, tensions began to simmer. The integration was far from smooth.
One major sticking point was economic. Singapore, a relatively developed port city, was expected to contribute significantly to the federal government's funds, but felt it wasn't getting enough development or benefits in return. There were squabbles over taxes and industrial policies, especially the slow implementation of the common market, which Singapore believed wasn't happening as agreed. But perhaps the deepest clash was ideological. The PAP's rallying cry of Malaysian Malaysia challenged the special position of the Malays, which was enshrined in the Malaysian constitution. Instead, it pushed for a meritocratic society where all races were equal. This directly contradicted the vision of Malaysia held by the dominant United Malays National Organisation, or UMNO, in the federal government, which championed Malay special rights and affirmative action. For UMNO, the Malaysian Malaysia campaign was seen as a direct threat to Malay political dominance and the fragile racial balance within the new federation. The political rhetoric grew increasingly heated. Racial riots in Singapore in 1964 further deepened the mistrust and fear between communities and between the state and federal governments. Lee Kuan Yew's passionate speeches for Malaysian Malaysia resonated with many, but the deeply alarmed leaders in Kuala Lumpur, who viewed them as inflammatory and destabilizing to the Federation's unity, which leads to the inevitable split and a forced departure. The situation deteriorated to a point where a peaceful solution seemed impossible. Tunku Abdul Rahman, then Prime Minister of Malaysia, came to believe that Singapore's continued presence would only lead to more severe communal unrest and political instability for the entire federation. He saw separation as the only way to prevent widespread bloodshed. So, on August 9, 1965, the Malaysian Parliament voted unanimously to expel Singapore from the Federation. This wasn't a mutual happy parting of ways. From Singapore's perspective, it was presented with a done deal. Lee Kuan Yew's tearful press conference announcing the separation, where he famously declared, "For me, it is a moment of anguish because all my life I have believed in merger and unity of the two territories," vividly captures the profound disappointment and sorrow felt by many Singaporean leaders at that time. It wasn't a choice they had actively pursued, but rather one they felt was forced upon them. So, how should we reconcile different perspectives? While some might interpret Lee Kuan Yew's strong stance and the Malaysian Malaysia campaign as a deliberate provocation to leave, leading to the perception that Singapore chose to go, it's crucial to understand the context. The PAP's agenda was to build a truly multiracial Malaysia, which fundamentally clashed with the existing political order and racial policies. The federal government, feeling their authority and the very foundation of the federation threatened, made the ultimate decision to sever ties. So, to say Singapore chose to leave might be an oversimplification. While Singapore's leaders certainly pushed for a different vision of Malaysia, the final decision for separation was made by the Malaysian federal government. Singapore was expelled, even if the groundwork for that expulsion was laid by deep, irreconcilable differences. The perception I encountered in Sarawak is a valid one, reflecting a particular interpretation of events, perhaps highlighting Singapore's assertive political style during that period. However, understanding the parliamentary vote and the emotional context of Lee Kuan Yew's declaration reveals a more nuanced truth. Singapore was indeed asked to leave, a move driven by a deep ideological chasm that ultimately proved too wide to bridge. This historical event continues to shape the identities and trajectories of both Singapore and Malaysia, reminding us that history is rarely black and white, and perspectives can differ significantly based on experience and interpretation. What are your thoughts on this complex chapter of history? Let me know in the comments. Meanwhile, majulah Singapura and have a good 60 Singapore dollars.